My yearly expenses of being a taxi driver, drum roll. Hello everyone, it's Tom the Taxi Driver. I'm going to do an expense video. It's been a while since I've done this, and it kind of shocks me that I have such high expenses in the taxi. Let's begin. First one is the obvious one, is the taxi itself. Now I pay £1,087.01 every single month. That is literally seared into my brain because that's like my biggest outgoing out of everything. I might as well live in it for how much that it costs. By the way, I'm making this video because it's right about now, the kind of anniversary of owning my taxi, where all these expenses come out. So of course, tax, insurance, meter, you name it, it's all there. Insurance I was really scared about because I heard of stories of drivers who are on £1,500 for the year going up to about £2,000 just because of inflation, a few things happening in the insurance industry, etc. But I was quite surprised. Mine only went up to £1,595. So I think it was about £50 more than what I paid last year. So even with inflation, I think that's kind of a net win, albeit expensive. Some of you might be wondering, well, that seems like a lot of money, like $1,595. And that's also 5 years no claims of being a taxi driver. Why is that so expensive? Well, it's because we have to have something called hire and reward insurance. Because we have a complete stranger in the taxi, we're kind of insuring against them whatever happens. If it was a personal friend or relative, slightly different. Hire and reward insurance, super expensive, really complicated. I can't even drive other people's cars third party. Yeah, that's taxi insurance for you. Tax. £180 for the year, although I could have paid £99 for 6 months. Why would I do such a thing? So 180 full year, done. Now to be compliant, London taxis need 2 MOTs a year. It's just a normal bog standard MOT. I can take it to any MOT testing station. So I guess it's about, what, £45 for the average MOT, £90 a year. Now TfL have their own kind of MOT. It's called an overhaul or a taxi inspection. Basically, they had to check the standard of it to ensure that it is safe, comfortable, whatever, for passenger usage. And all the other things like, is the credit card fitted? Has there been correct signage? Are all the disability features there? Disabled ramp, etc. And for that privilege, I have to pay TfL £110 a year for. This is where these costs start coming out of nowhere. The meter. Yeah, I don't own that. I actually have to rent that. So to rent that every year is £162. Now, the meter is actually more than what it costs for me to renew my badge. We have a badge and a bill. So that's my bill. That's got my details, documents on there. And of course, my actual taxi badge itself. So to do that, that's every 3 years, is £300. So, I don't know, £100 a year. To also satisfy that, you need to be a part of the DBS criminal record update check. Now, what you used to do was that you would just apply for a criminal record check, then go and renew your badge with TfL. But now they say that you must be on the update service. It's £13 a year, and basically you get a unique code that means you can be constantly updated upon. So to kind of just get a taxi in place, ready to drive for the year, is just over £15,000. That's before I've done anything. I've not even put fuel in it. I've not even started to drive it. There's loads of other stuff. Let's keep going. There is an optional banding here of stuff that you can pay out for. Most cab drivers will have an accountant. Yes, the economics of driving a taxi is fairly simple. What's my expenses? Taxi, fuel. What's my income? Or whatever goes through the card machine, minus your expenses off your income, Bob's your uncle, there's your tax return. But there's other things to bear in mind as well, like the depreciation of the cab, which completely blows my mind. I have no idea about that. I'd much rather leave that in the hands of a professional who can most certainly sort that out in a much better way than I can understand, particularly within the COVID-19 pandemic. We was able to write off more of the depreciation of the cab in 2020 at a time when I wasn't able to generate enough cash flow to pay my tax bill, right? So it basically meant I just deferred my tax bill to later years. So an accountant after that, depending on who you go to, mine's £40 a month, so what, just under 500 quid for the year. A union. Now this is more important than ever because of the amount of people on the streets, cycling vigilantes who are trying to actively catch cab drivers and try and lose their livelihood. And the fact that I can lose my livelihood for 6 points, that doesn't have to be whilst I'm driving my taxi in London. That could be out in a personal vehicle. I could accidentally accrue those points. More important that you have people like the help of a union with a legal department for anything like that. It could be for things that are just like difficulties in renewing my badge. That's what a union's there for, to help out with all these kind of driver related queries, because we're all self-employed. Yes, we go through TfL, but you do need a bit of assistance in other areas that's not within TfL's domain. So my union is £23.80 a year. At £30 a year, I've got Cabbies Mate. Now, this is a great subscription. It is just an old school A to Z map, but in a real nice app format, so I can easily access it. I'm kind of like old school cabbie with new school tech, right? I love the A to Z maps because that's what my brain sees when I'm seeing the streets. That's essential in my mind, although listed as an optional. So just these optional expenses, so accountant, union and Cabbies Mate, they're £800 a year. And then we've got the overall running costs. So these are the kind of costs that will go up as we do more driving, as we do more work. So yes, I will be turning over more money, but of course the cost of doing business will then go up. Now I've put here card machine. Card machine will vary a lot. Some will actually charge you like a monthly fee if you don't do enough transactions on it. Some will do an installation fee. Others will just take it out of your transaction costs. So mine's just a transaction cost, so I haven't got that to worry about. Petrol's one of the, obviously the other big expenses of driving a taxi. Hugely vary depending on where you live, have you got access to an electric charging point, etc. Mine's about 17-ish pounds a day, so potentially looking like £85 a week. If I'm working, 48 weeks of the year, it's about £4,000 a year. Tyres. Now, the kind of mileage I do, I probably can get about 40,000 miles out of a set of tyres. And per corner, I think they're about like £130 per tyre. So you're talking just over 500 quid for something that lasts about 2 years. So break that down into a year, £260. I'm actually in a partnership with Enzo Tyres, who made tyres specifically for the LEVC TXE taxi. They've been wonderful in terms of wear life. I've got one of their newer compounds on the cab. Shout out to those guys. They kind of let me trial the tyres, so they've been great. Servicing. Now, this varies upon year on year and depending on how many services you have for the taxi. I only had 3 years of servicing when I got the taxi, so I've had to pay for year 4, and I'm just coming up to year 5, which is £250 to get that serviced. And little things like receipts. It's kind of minor stuff, but it's still something you have to pay out for. You're dropping off someone in the city, they want a receipt so they can claim on expenses, you need that, right? I don't know, I'll probably spend about £10 a year on receipts. It's not a great deal. So those kind of running costs put me at about £4,500. So in total, everything, my yearly expenses of being a taxi driver, drum roll, £20,644.72. It just astounds me every year. It's obviously definitely gone up. That's before I've taken any money. So that's kind of my, for the year, assuming I'm doing 5 days a week, that's my break even. I have to make £20,000 to break even. That's pretty gnarly. Whenever people say to me like, oh, is it still worth doing the knowledge and being able to be a part-time cab driver? These are the kind of things you've got to think about. The biggest expense is, of course, my taxi at over £1,000 a month. And if you rent, it's probably a little bit more because you've got all of the insurance and tax and everything factored into that price. But if you've got a way of renting a taxi where you can hand it back relatively easy and get another one, maybe you can still do this job part-time. Other things I've not included here is other occupational hazards. So things like if you're driving in a cab a lot, you might need to get some physio work done. Like my ankle mobility suffered a bit because I've always been sat down. I'm sure my shoulders, back, all that sort of stuff is probably something to think about. Pension. Obviously being self-employed, you've got to put a chunk aside for your pension. So you might want to up those yearly costs to say 25,000, depending on how much you want to put away, how much you deem adequate for your retirement plans. And just daily cost as well, like costs of doing business. Like you might be someone like me who wants to get a coffee when you're out and about, or the odd snack here and there. That is part of doing the job. That is an expense related to me doing the job, right? Cheers for tuning in on that. I'm going to do an update in a few months' time because I've nearly paid my taxi off. Yes, and with that means my expenses are about £13,000 less a year. I'm dreadfully excited, so I can't wait to share that with you. If you want to know potentially how much a London cab driver could earn, well, I'll leave this video on screen for you now.